more time for Kelly Oxford and her super funny book. Congratulations on the book. I love it.
Thank you. I'm glad you read it.
I did read it.
Oh my God. Wow.
I feel like funny memories about awful moments is how I live my life.
Yeah, I think all of us kind of do, but some people miss out on the funny part of it.
Do you ever have moments in your life where you randomly remember awful things or embarrassing things that have happened to you? Like you weren't even thinking about it before and it pops in your head and you just have to go, oh shit, I did that.
Yeah, I think does everybody do that? I do that.
I assume people blindly just walk through life.
I get visuals of things during the day that make no sense.
Like what?
I don't know, like walking through a store and feeling like sad, or going back to elementary school and having a teacher yell at me. Like things like that pop out of nowhere. I've asked doctors, I'm like, am I okay? They're like, yeah, you have a brain. You're just thinking. I was like, oh, okay, great.
Your brain is just trying to find a way for you to be in pain in a moment where you don't need pain at all.
Yeah, exactly. It's fun. I love being human.
Thanks, brain.
Yeah, thank you. Great to be alive.
So when did you get the idea for this book?
Well, this book is similar to my first book. And it's just the types of stories that I like to tell, because I do essentially write for me, and creativity is a way that I deal with my anxiety, and so writing about my anxiety helps fuel the creativity and also helps me get over the anxiety, if that makes any sense.
And you love, backstage you said you don't love talking about yourself, but you love writing about yourself.
Yeah, I can write about myself.
You love writing about yourself, or is it just what comes most naturally where you sort of can find humor for the most part?
I just think that that's a very good question. That's a very good question. I think so far I like writing about fictional characters and myself. I just like writing, period. And so far I've had enough stories to fill 2 books. So I've done that because it's easier than coming up and crafting a character and crafting an arc. Having lived them, I think the ones that I've shared have been worthy of sharing for different lessons. Mostly, trying to normalize that people make mistakes every day and that it's okay, and that you can learn to laugh at yourself and laugh at your anxiety.
There's a section of the book where you're dumped by a PhD after high school. And one of the things that you say is that you don't get to tell him is that the reason that you're going to bars is because you're trying to hear dialogue. You're trying to hear people talk to perfect your dialogue. Was that true at the time? Were you actually that conscious of your writing in that moment?
I've always, since I was a kid, I've just been interested in people and the psychology of people and how people do talk to each other. As a kid, I would love when my parents had people over, and even if I was sent to bed, I'd have my door open and I'm like, louder, like just keep talking. I want to hear everything.
I was an only child, so I was just sort of like, let me just be around you guys while you're talking.
Yeah, that was my favorite. I wish I had been an only child. Like, sorry, my sister, but.
No, it was actually not that great, because then when you got around peers and other kids, you would try to engage them in the conversations you saw parents having, and they were like, what? I don't want to talk about Basic Instinct. What is that?
I would have been your friend. Most of my friends are only children for that reason exactly, because I'm an observer, and that's one of my favorite things to do. I always pick the weirdest kids to be friends with. It sounds like you were weird.
I was weird.
Yeah.
I was very weird.
Yeah.
When did your writing take off, or when did you find a process for writing that worked for you?
That's a good question again. I think I've always written the same. Written, for myself when I would take classes, screenwriting classes. I would write the same way. But once I was popular enough on Twitter for, an agent to call me and ask me if I had any material. I had a ton of material, and I was able to give it to them, and they were like, this is actually good. Like, they weren't really sure what I was going to give to them, and I was able to sell 2 pilots, right away, and I wrote a book proposal because there were longer stories that I wanted to tell, because up until then, I had been blogging was probably the longest form of writing that I could put out publicly, and there's only so much you can write in a blog, like maybe 500 to 1,000 words. So so I knew that there was a huge, source of longer stories that I wanted to tell. So that's the first book. Sale was probably, once I sold the screenplays, was like the biggest deal for me.
Are you sort of wake up early in the morning and write kind of thing, or are you write when you feel inspired?
I do. I wake up early in the morning and think about all the things I'm going to write. And then I do the emails and all the procrastination and all of that stuff. And then somewhere around 3 or 4, I can write for 3 hours straight. And then late at night, sometimes I'll write, until 3 in the morning or 2 in the morning.
What's the hardest time that you've had writing? Was there ever a period of your life where like, I got nothing?
No. Only because I write like TV and movies and books. So
that sort of gives
if
you
I'm
something.
if I'm feeling like I can't write a story for the book today, I can switch over to
Helping
a
somebody
TV,
else write.
Well,
kinda.
doing like my TV script or doing a movie script, which are totally different beasts than writing a book. So I always have something on the go to switch to if I don't feel the mood for one.
Right, there's like with a TV and movie script, there's never really a blank page once you've sort of
Yeah.
pitched an idea. You have
Yeah.
something that you're working off of.
Yeah, exactly.
And a way to move
Once
forward.
you've outlined it, it's pretty much good to go.
Do you start with an outline with
Yeah,
your
yeah.
with all your stories, or specifically just with TV and movies?
Just with TV and movies, I do the outlines. With the books, I just
Robert
outline in my
McKee
head.
manual?
Yeah, no, I just outline it in my head with the books because the stories that I tell in the books, I already know. If I remember them as pieces of my life, then I know there was an ending because I learned something from it. So then I start from the end and move my way back to where the beginning of the story actually was, which I can do in my head.
What was the hardest story for you to sort of remember and write about and go through in this book?
That's a good question. I think they were all pretty much the same. I think the hardest one to write was also the easiest one to write, about my parents' friend who's also like my second father who died. That one was really emotional to write, but it was also very easy to want to go back into my past and relive the good times that I had with him, and then also go through his death and really just processing it. So that one was like the most difficult in that sense, but not in a sense of trying to remember it. I think I only write the things that I remember just because I know that then there's a reason to tell the story.
How much do you edit, and how many drafts do you usually write of stories like this? I'd imagine with movie scripts and TV scripts, you're constantly
Yeah.
drafting, constantly rewriting. You're rewriting
Yeah.
on set a lot of the time. But what
Yeah.
about when it comes to this?
I think it was like one like crazy rough draft, and then an edit, and then like a polish.
That's
Yeah.
pretty quick.
Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't bad at all. It wasn't bad at all. I'll do another.
Talk to me about the period of time where you got, as you said, big on Twitter, big enough for an agent to contact you. So you hadn't been published yet. You've been writing blogs here
Yeah.
and there, I guess.
Yeah.
At that time.
Yeah.
So what was that like? What were you putting on Twitter, and what do you think the agent responded to?
I think it was just the jokes, because I used to write a lot of jokes on Twitter, and they were really strong, topical jokes that would have been things that are on late night monologues. And actually, Jimmy Kimmel contacted me while I was just on Twitter and asked me, if I wanted to be a monologue writer, but I was just going out to pitch this pilot, which I ended up selling, and then I couldn't work for him and write a pilot because I'd never written a pilot before. And
Then you ended up inadvertently working for him, right? You guys came up with the
we
Mean
became
Tweets
friends.
idea.
Yeah, we became really good friends, and Mean Tweets was born with me at his kitchen table with him and his wife Molly, and Jimmy and I were reading our meanest tweets that day back to each other, the meanest things that trolls were writing us.
You get mean tweets every day?
Not anymore. There was a period where it was like crazy, where I think everybody just mean tweeted everybody, but it's really slowed down a lot. I think maybe because of the political climate, everybody that has like vitriol in them is just putting it either towards one side that they're on or the other side that they're on.
They've got real targets now.
They've got real targets. They're not just going after like some mom of 3.
They're just looking for funny women on Twitter to knock down.
So Jimmy and I were reading them back and forth, and Molly was having such a good time listening to these awful things that she just said, oh my God, we need to do this as a segment on the show. And every time a guest comes on, we'll pull them to the side and we'll record it and save them all until we have enough to play them.
Have you ever had a celebrity take issue with any of them? Or not want to read them?
I think they have. I think a lot of I've heard that a lot of PR people will say no without even asking them because they don't want to deal with it.
Right.
But I think most people do it. Like they've had everybody do it.
That's so weird because I bet the celebrity themselves love doing it.
Of course
but
they do.
this PR person is like, I don't even want to risk them having to know that someone thinks The Rock thinks that, someone thinks The Rock is a fuckwad or something.
Right. Exactly.
Some innocuous insult that means
I
nothing.
think anybody would want to do it. It's really funny.
What has been the meanest tweet none of the death ones,
that
I'm sure you've gotten, everyone gets like death.
Yeah, death ones, like rape ones.
No,
Super funny, right? I know, it's crazy. People are crazy.
Yeah, that's awful.
Like, people have left comments for my kids saying, like, because my husband and I recently separated amicably, as amicably as you can separate.
It's like that you threw that in. Like the whole, like before you said amicably, the whole audience was going, was it amicable? What
yeah.
were you talking about?
Well, it's important when you have kids to make sure that they know that. But somebody like left a comment for my daughter asking her if she missed her dad, and I'm like, what an asshole. Who would do that to a kid? I know.
What do you think about humanity when you see that? I'd imagine.
I think they're bored. I really don't think that they're bad people. I really just think that they're bored, and you get, it's almost like taking one for the team. It's sort of like somebody feels really crappy today. I'm going to take it for the team. They can feel better about themselves. Maybe they won't do something heinous if they just yell at me for a second. It's sort of like when religious people come to my door and they knock on the door and I don't tell them to like scram, and I listen to them for 2 minutes and I'm like, there, now they think they're going to heaven. So this is great. And then I feel good about myself.
And then you tell them to scram, though.
Yeah, and then I shut the door on their face.
Don't you worry that you're kind of teasing them for those 2 minutes?
No, they love it. They love it. They need an audience. They're going door to door to talk.
She didn't sign up, but she listened.
But
so
I
we might have
listened.
reached her. We might have reached her.
And then they feel like they've done their thing, and then I feel like I've done my thing, and maybe if there's a heaven, I'll go to heaven. Because I'm such a good person.
3 kids, right?
Yeah, I do.
3 kids.
Yeah.
So what is your writing process like having 3 kids
Coming
around?
home, get it done before they come home.
Oh, right, because they're at school now, so you
They're
get
at
to...
school. And in the summer, it's a little trickier. But you just have to do it.
There should be no summer vacations.
There should be no summer vacation.
I don't know one parent who believes that there should be summer vacations.
No, there shouldn't be. But the good thing about LA is that school starts very early. It starts August 12th or August 10th. So
Sort of just a few weeks off.
It's just like it's like 6 weeks off or something.
Are there any sort of awful moments that you won't write about, that you won't talk about, that you don't find funny? Or are you the type of person who can find humor in most awful moments?
No, I can find humor. I think that there are definitely things that I don't want to write about, but that's always in the moment. And I think given time and reflection, retrospect, figuring out what I learned from it, then I'll be fine to write pretty much anything.
Really?
Yeah.
Has there ever been like an awful moment that you started writing that you were like, I'm not finding
No,
the
I mean, I
through
wrote
line with the
about,
humor.
I know, I wrote about like peeing my pants once in a gas station, like when I was like almost an adult. Like if I'm willing to share that with people, then I'm okay.
It's not that bad.
It was so embarrassing. I told the lady I had a kidney problem and needed an operation. But really, I just had to pee so bad.
Yeah, okay, kidney
Yeah,
problem.
and she was just staring at my pants that were just like drenched in pee. And I'm talking about it with you now, so anything. I'll talk about
Safe
anything.
place. This is a safe space. You can
safe
talk
space.
about all the times you urinated, pooped,
All of
anything
it.
like that.
All of it. Yeah, nothing's too humiliating for me, I don't think.
Did you ever have a 2 issue? An issue number 2?
No. I wish I had.
neither
That'd
have I.
be great material.
Never.
Never? No,
Right.
not you, never.
No. Back to Twitter for a second, because we were talking about Twitter, and I failed to bring this up. This thing that happened to you was you created this hashtag that trended that a lot of people contributed to. It was really incredible. It was about sexual assault.
Yeah.
Talk about this. How did this happen?
Not okay hashtag. It was when the tape of Billy Bush and Trump talking about grabbing a woman's pussy and him laughing and all of that stuff happened. A lot of people on Twitter ask me about what rape culture is or say there's no such thing as rape culture. And the second I saw that video, I was like, oh, this is great. Everybody on Twitter right now is watching this. Everybody is seeing this video. So now they're going to know what rape culture is. Billy Bush laughing at Trump saying he can grab a woman's pussy is what rape culture is.
I'll do you one better.
Yeah.
A country voting that person president
we
is
didn't
what
even
rape
think that was
culture
possible.
is.
And yeah, exactly. We didn't even think that was possible at that point. But, you know, and then on top of that, you know, Trump saying that you can grab a woman in the pussy. The first time I was sexually assaulted, I was 12, and I was on a bus, and this old man, like, just grabbed me in the pussy. And so I was like, oh, I'm hearing somebody brag about something that was totally upset. I mean, it's so upsetting to me when I was a child, and it isn't funny. So I tweeted, I shared that story on Twitter, and I asked women to share their stories of sexual assault, because I know all of my girlfriends have either been raped or sexually assaulted, and certainly I can't live in a specific bubble where only my friends have had that happen to them. And as it turns out, millions of women contacted me or added me back on Twitter and told their stories as well. And it was insanely overwhelming and amazing at the same time.
What did that mean? Were you surprised by that?
I was surprised that it was millions. I knew that women would respond, but I was surprised at how quickly women were and how sort of happy they were to be sharing these painful, extremely painful memories, and how cathartic it was for them to share, and how willing and sort of like in your face it was feeling like it was just everybody wanted to add their story to it just to prove a point that you know, this is happening every day. I mean, it happens. It's the craziest thing. I had people telling me, you know, they were in a toy store when they were a little kid, and a man walked by and just put their hand up her dress, and, you know, a girl was standing with her parents in an elevator going up the Space Needle, and there was a man standing behind them that did the same thing to her. And I'm just like, it happens every day. It happens when you're standing with your parents. Like, people are constantly objectifying women to the point where they're touching their bodies, which is insane. It's really crazy if you think about it.
What did you think about Twitter as a platform for that message? Yeah. Because you have this environment where all of these women can share their story.
Yeah, there's nowhere else to do that.
But you also have this environment where if anybody wants to respond negatively or, for better, shittily towards this, they can also do that. So you have women sharing their story, and then when you read down the comments on that tweet or the ads on that tweet, it's like you're a lying bitch or something.
Right.
It's just horrible. So it's this idea that, like, Twitter itself ostensibly is for the greatest parts of us and the absolute and the worst parts of us.
And I think, to be fair, too, I really don't think there were that many negative comments, because I really did go through all of them. And there were, I mean, maybe 3 instances where I had to block somebody, and I would talk to the woman that some man attacked. But there were really only 3. Like, there was...
That's really good numbers.
It's really good numbers.
Considering Twitter.
Considering, yeah. I think it was just such a serious topic, and, you know, it was just so disarming to see how many people sexual assaults affected.
So then I finished that story with, what did it feel like on November 9th when, you know, he won the election? Because you didn't just sort of post this on Twitter and have your story go out there. All these women shared their story.
Yeah. It was dark. It was crazy dark. I think everybody felt it was just like a really dark, surreal, leave your body experience. I think that everybody was on board, pretty much. I mean, everybody in my world was on board with that.
I took pills and went to bed.
Yeah, but my husband moved out.
He moved out that day?
Yeah.
Okay, why?
Because that was just the time.
It had nothing to do, I mean...
It had nothing to do with the election. It was just like the worst timing for everything. But my family has a really good sense of humor. My daughter's like, I cannot believe that Trump is president and my dad is moving out on the same day. But she was laughing about it.
She went to school and she was like...
Like, yo, guess what happened to me, guys?
That is so
It's so dark. I know, it's so dark.
But
everybody's happier now, so that's great.
I do love, sort of, it was amicable.
It was amicable.
It was amicable.
Everybody's
Calm
happy.
down, everybody. It was amicable.
Everybody's happy.
Let's actually get some questions from you guys. Who's got a mic right there?
Hey, Kelly.
Hi.
I was wondering, after your first book, did you know that you still had more material that maybe you didn't get to put in the first one? That's why you did the second one?
Yeah. I thank you for your question. I did because I had moved to Los Angeles, and I knew that the move from Canada to Los Angeles with my family would give me a ton of material, which it did. And then as far as the other stories go that weren't about the move, they were always sort of stories that could have been in the first book. But once you write, 330 pages, you're like, whoa, you can stop now, Kelly. Save it for the next one.
How do you feel about the stereotypes about Canadians that Americans sort of perpetuate all the time and talk about?
I think they're okay. They're mostly because of, like, Bob and Doug McKenzie, so it doesn't really matter. Right? Like, all the out and about.
That's true, yeah. I always think of it as, like, Canadians are incredibly
really
nice.
nice.
Yeah.
I don't
For whatever reason, make fun of that.
Yeah, I don't think we're that nice. We're okay. We're just okay.
You're normal people.
We're just normal people. We're the same as Americans, except we have a safety net called our government. Yeah, we don't have to fear. We don't have the fear that you guys have to live with, which is really apparent. And America, I talked about this a few weeks ago. Canadians, have this thing where they, Americans call Canadians kind and nice, but really Canadians call Americans ignorant and arrogant. And when I moved here, I'm like, well, it's not an ignorance or an arrogance. It's just there's so much self-preservation that's necessary here. There's so much, I need to get ahead. I don't really know what you're doing back there because I need to do this. Is based on the lack of having the fundamental safety net that all Canadians feel they have. Like, everybody in Canada grows up knowing they're going to go to university, knowing if they fall down in the street, an ambulance is going to show up in 2 seconds and 30 people are going to run in and help them. Growing up in an environment like that is very different from growing up in an environment that, like, here in the States.
Raw capitalism.
Yeah.
That's what we live with here.
Yeah.
Next question.
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you for being here. So, what special advice would you give to up-and-coming writers that have writer blocks? And what was your first book that you did you remember your first book that you read?
That you read
in your life?
Those are such good questions. Well, first of all, advice for writers is to just write every day and read your favorite writers.
Favorite writer?
Probably Bukowski, even though I know he had a very interesting relationship with women. He's just so raw, and he's such
Henry
a
Miller,
visual,
and he's a great writer. Yeah,
and so visual. Bukowski's just so easy and visual and raw about himself that I just love him so much. So read your favorite writers, write every day, no matter what it is. For writer's block, walking and thinking out things. The actual movement really helps. And I don't remember my first book because I started reading like crazy young. I'd have to ask my mom. But thank you for your questions.
Do you remember the first time you recognized an author in terms of your first book? Like, you read a book and you were like, oh, this is written by someone.
Probably Judy Blume or Laura Ingalls Wilder. One of those two. Yeah.
One more question.
Hi, Kelly. Thanks for being here. Besides Bukowski, are there any contemporary writers that you really admire? And did you have trouble finding your writing voice, or was it always kind of there?
Oh, no. Yeah, no, I always just wrote the way that I talk and feel and am. I never tried to change it, and I think that's why I suggest reading the writers you feel you relate to the most, so that in the back of your mind, I'm not a Henry Miller writer. So if I'm reading Henry Miller, I'm like, oh, I'm a shitty writer, or I love Joan Didion, but I'm not brilliant like her in her observations. So I read her for fun, but when I'm trying to write, I wouldn't necessarily read her. What was the other part of your question?
Are there any more like contemporary writers that you admire?
Can we stick to this,
peers?
what we were just
Yeah.
talking about? Because I'm fascinated by this.
Yeah.
So when you're writing something and you're looking for inspiration, do you like hate read things to know that you'll be that you'll be better than it?
No, I don't do that. No, I don't. I don't do any of that. I usually just go see a movie. Right. Seeing a movie is great because you get the story and then you get the inspiration, and it's so you know, it just gets me in the mood to write and to create things. It's usually movies. As far as writers go, I love Murakami, and you know, Joan Didion. Her recent book was the last book that I read, which is great.
Kelly, when you find out the world is against you and other funny memories about awful moments, it's on shelves now, right? People can get it.
Today is pub day. It's
Today's
his birthday.
pub day.
It's his birthday. Happy birthday.
And go buy it at the Strand, a local bookstore, or buy it on Amazon.
I was there last night.
You were?
Big event.
It's the best place.
Yeah, it was great.
I love that bookstore. Kelly Oxford, everybody. Kelly, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks so much.